26th Oshkosh Common Council meeting. Please call the roll.
Erickson.
Here.
Ford.
Here.
Mugrower.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Wojciechowski.
Here.
Palmieri.
Here.
Present 7.
Councilmember Erickson will lead us in the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
We come together this evening to discuss the issues that confront our city. May we honor those who have come before us, including the original stewards of this area, the Menominee and Ho-Chunk nations. May our decisions tonight improve the quality of life in our city and for our residents.
And we have a Red Ribbon Week, October 23rd through the 31st proclamation this evening. So Hannah Wills is here from Breakwater to receive this proclamation. Whereas alcohol and drug misuse affect individuals, families, and communities across the city of Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and the nation. And whereas it is imperative that visible, unified efforts by community members be launched to prevent and reduce youth and adult substance abuse use. And whereas Red Ribbon Week offers citizens the opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to drug-free lifestyles. And whereas Red Ribbon Week will be celebrated in the city of Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and across the nation, October 23rd through the 31st. And whereas business, government, parents, law enforcement, media, medical institutions, religious institutions, schools, senior citizens, service organizations, and youth will demonstrate their commitment to healthy, drug-free lifestyles by wearing and displaying red ribbons during this week-long campaign. And whereas Breakwater, a substance misuse prevention coalition of the community of Oshkosh, Wisconsin, further commits its resources to ensure the success of Red Ribbon Week. Now therefore, I, Lori Palmieri, Mayor of the city of Oshkosh, do hereby proclaim October 23rd through the 31st as Red Ribbon Week throughout the city of Oshkosh. And I encourage all residents to participate in drug prevention education activities, not only during Red Ribbon Week, but throughout the year. Hand that to you.
Yes, thank you, Lori. I just want to say thank you for the dedication to this issue. Substance use not only affects, underserved populations, but really our entire community. And Breakwater is really just trying to break the stigma that surrounds substance use in our community. So if anybody has any questions, comments, wants to learn more about how they can get involved in Breakwater's prevention efforts, you can go to breakwaterwi.org.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we should clap for that. Yeah.
Pam, do we have any citizens registered to speak to council this evening?
No, we do not.
How about any public comments on agenda items?
No one is registered.
All right, we'll move on to consent agenda. Have to take a motion and a second.
So move.
Second.
Discussion on the agenda?
Deputy Mayor?
I have one quick question for actually the city clerk. Sorry I didn't give you a heads up on this one, but I think you'll be all right. 21-532, establish voting districts. With everything that goes with the partisanship at the state level in terms of voting districts and things that happen at their level, how do you do it and how does it work for the municipal level in terms of determining our voting districts? Just so to tell people at home how it works here in Oshkosh.
The clerk's office works with community development, Jeff Now. What happens is we receive the plan from the county, and they pretty much have the districts already set. We just get to draw the ward line. But if you have further questions on how the numbers were arrived at, Jeff would be able to answer.
Nope, just wanted to make sure that people at home, it's totally nonpartisan at the local
Yeah.
level, and
And
just want to
then you-
reassure people of that.
Yes, and then you're going to approve it tonight, and then it will go back to the county for their final approval, mid-November.
Perfect. And then, Madam Mayor, if we could pull number 8, that would be Res 21517, just for a separate discussion and vote.
And Mayor, if we could pull 7 also, 21516, please.
Any others? All right, let's go ahead and vote on the consent agenda minus number 7, Resolution 21516, and minus number 8, 21517.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Mugrower,
Aye?
Hanson,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Wojciechowski,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
And so we will go to 21516, number 7. I'll need a motion and a second for that item.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion.
James.
I had a sneaky suspicion you were going to be asking me to step forward.
First of all, thank you for coming up ahead of time. Can you just give a 10,000-foot summary for everybody at home? Mainly timelines, what we've been dealing with, and then the Grand Slam coup de grace that what we put in is cleaner than what we take out for me.
Yeah, I think, this permit challenge goes back, actually, to 2 permit cycles. We challenged our last permit. It was settled right about the time that the new one was coming out, so some of the things we needed to challenge again. The biggest challenge regarding this is our phosphorus concentration limits. What was originally put in the permit versus what is in this proposed settlement is an order of magnitude higher. So it will be much less difficult for us to be able to comply with that ultimate concentration for phosphorus. This was the result of a lot of back and forth, not only from Public Works, the city attorney's office, but also our outside legal and technical teams. We've been working on this for 3-4 years now, Lynn. Just with this permit term, not counting the 5 years on the prior permit term. So at the end of the day, as you mentioned, the water we take in from Lake Winnebago is Lake Winnebago water. It requires a lot of treatment to get it to the point that we can consume it, and what the wastewater plant puts back into the river and the lake is really, cleaner than what we took out of it. But what this does is this gives us a lot more flexibility on our compliance timelines. The end timeline for final compliance has not changed, but it gives us a lot of flexibility with being able to meet the interim timelines that we need to meet with the department.
Thanks, James, and I really want to thank staff on this. Dealing with the DNR is absurd, to say the least, but you guys were professionals through and through. Lynn, thank you. I would have killed those people in some of those meetings, but you guys are a little bit better than I am, so thank your staff, thank both of you, so, and we really appreciate that battle.
Thank you.
All right.
I don't think anybody's got any more questions for you, James.
Resolution 21517.
We do them separately.
Oh, I'm sorry, please call the roll on 516.
Erickson,
Thank you.
Ford,
Aye.
Mugrower,
Aye?
Hanson,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Wojciechowski,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
So we'll need a motion and a second on 21517.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Pulled this for just a couple of quick reasons, and in the end, it's gonna pass 7-0, but 2 meetings in a row that were being asked to do something that's not routine. And so that would be my first part, is that something like this maybe doesn't belong in consent, as a reminder maybe to the city manager's office that this necessarily isn't routine in nature. City staff is asking us to do some unassigned fund balance to pay for a project that didn't go through the CIP, and so that would be the one of the first reasons I wanted to pull it. Second, and this may be for IT, and Mr. Newman maybe wants to try to address it. If he can't, somebody else I'm sure can. We're in October. We're going to be approving a 2022 budget in a few, 2 meetings, or 1 meeting, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. This didn't go through the normal CIP process, either for the 21 year or the 22 year, and it's not a small purchase, and so I figured maybe you wouldn't mind just sharing with us why we're here now being asked to do this just before the end of 21, and why we couldn't have included it in the 22 CIP.
Nope, no problem. Happy to answer that. It was a long research project in direction that we could take with our telecommunications system. We did not have any of the data back in time to actually include it in the CIP. By the time we did get the data back, then it was a question of when and how do we fund this project? Because I don't know if anybody's sat in any of our offices, but the current telecommunications system is beyond aged.
Antiquated at the best?
We'll go with that.
Have you tried our little council and mayor's office phone? You can't make incoming and outgoing calls.
No, and honestly, I know it's going to get a unanimous vote. I'll be approving it as well, or voting for approval as well. But I think it's just important that, especially when staff is asking us to do something out of the ordinary, that we have a small discussion at least about it.
Absolutely.
And whether it's a part of this discussion now, it may not be appropriate. It may be more appropriate later in the meeting under the budget enhancement stuff. 2 meetings in a row, we've been asked to do something with some fund balance, and 1 can be a one-off, 2 starts a pattern in terms of piecemealing our requests in terms of, or your requests in terms of our use of fund balance. So whether that's a discussion now or later in the meeting, it may be more appropriate later. I don't, probably, but I think city staff would probably owe us a little bit of some guidance in terms of what they're thinking, and rather than a onesie, twosie piecemeal.
We can do it later on in the meeting. and
Seems
we can-
appropriate,
We
but-
can go through that, yeah.
Just a clarifying question, is this something that Long Range Finance has discussed at all about use of fund balance, any policy?
Long-range finance didn't get into the specific uses, but they did have a discussion of the fact that we have a
Yeah.
fund balance.
Yeah, because council approved a recommendation from Long Range Finance a little while back in terms of, we've got some parameters that we should prefer to work within in terms of a hard cap that we don't need to have in excess of I think it's 30%. We're above that, and we're going to be above that in the 22. But Long Range Finance does not get in the weeds in terms of single line budget
Right,
items.
yep, okay. All right, let's call the roll.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Hanson,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Wojciechowski,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
All right, this evening we have 1 new ordinance. There will be no action taken on this item. 21-534, amend Chapter 8 to eliminate auctioneers and direct solicitation license requirements, and to revise regulations pertaining to persons directly soliciting within the city of Oshkosh. No action again on that item, but I do want to ask City Attorney if she would just give a summary as to what we're doing with this resolution, or this ordinance, excuse me.
Yeah, we're just recommending that you remove the licensing requirements. We issue very few of those licenses. Actually, for the auctioneer's license, we couldn't find that we had issued any for a number of years. So the auctioneers, we do regulate under the zoning code already. It seemed more appropriate to just deal with the issues that are caused by those with auctions under the temporary use permits. So we would repeal this section and just deal with it from a zoning perspective. The door-to-door solicitation requires us to balance kind of First Amendment rights, and we had an older style ordinance that's common throughout the United States, but it does distinguish based upon the type of solicitation that's occurring door-to-door. Under some more recent case law, that is going to be constitutionally suspect. So rather than face a potential challenge, we looked at it and said, how many do we issue? What makes sense here? Some of the rules make sense to apply to everybody, no matter what happens. So we are proposing to keep those, but otherwise modify it to be more constitutionally sound.
Well, I'm actually glad this came up because I have been asked on a number of occasions, and perhaps other council members have too, whether or not the payment by a local newspaper to distribute, they're not newspapers, they're solicitive advertisements to non-subscribers amounts to unwanted solicitation. And it just occurred to me as you were describing that I wonder if that would in fact apply, or does it have to be a person going door to door as opposed to
The way
a,
the ordinance is written, it anticipates a person going door to door, knocking and engaging with.
okay, all right, thank you. All right, so next we do have one pending ordinance this evening, and that is 21-535 for cancellation of December 28th, 2021 council meeting. I'll take a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Please call the roll.
Erickson?
Aye.
Ford?
Aye.
Mugrower?
Aye.
Hanson?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Wojciechowski?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Carried 7.
We have one new resolution as the other one was withdrawn. That's 21-536, provide direction to staff relating to reversing the direction of traffic flow on the one-way pair of Central Street and Kentucky Street from West Nevada Avenue to West New York.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Councilmember Ford.
Sorry, ahead of you, Deputy Mayor. I'm sure we're asking the same thing. I'd love to have Mr. Collins come up here and the note to us, you recommend option 1, no left turn restrictions from Central Street onto Custer Avenue, and just like to know why.
Sure, thanks. I'll give you a little bit of a background on the issue, and then we also have representatives from the school district here and their consultant as well, if you have any questions. But as you're probably aware, the Oshkosh Area School District's looking to construct a new Merrill Middle School on the site of what's currently their athletic fields. And as part of their layout, they've identified the need or the desire to flip the one-way pairs of Kentucky and Central. And the reason for that, the proposed layout's up on the screen. So they're proposing that there'll be a bus drop-off area on Nevada Street, which is on the top of the screen. And then the first street there is Kentucky. So there'll be one-way traffic flow on Kentucky heading south, and that will be the drop-off area for the parents and also the pickup area. So one-way traffic flow going south on Kentucky, and then flipping that with Central, which is the one-way pair, and then Central would be one-way going northbound. So we took this issue to the Traffic and Parking Advisory Board, and overall they're supportive of the reversal of the traffic flow. However, the chair did have some concerns about left turns from Central onto Custer, which is the street in the middle of the screen. And his concern was related to vehicles exiting the driveway, which lines up with Custer there at the T. However, that parking area there in front of the school on Kentucky, there's only about 10 parking spots there, and a lot of it is handicap parking. So we're not anticipating a lot of vehicles exiting there. So after the Traffic and Parking Advisory Board meeting, we did ask the school district's architect and traffic consultant to take a look at that and see if there were any issues. They did a full traffic study in conjunction with this proposed layout, which they presented to the Traffic and Parking Advisory Board as well. But as a follow-up to that meeting, we asked them to evaluate those left turns and if a restriction was necessary. So a couple things. First of all, we're looking to with the next meeting to get an ordinance to flip those one-way pairs, because the school district, that is critical to their plan. If we don't do that, then they have to go back to the drawing board with the layout. So I don't think that that wasn't controversial at all. However, the left turn restrictions, the three options are, the Traffic and Parking Advisory Board recommended a permanent left turn restriction, which I think that's a little overboard. I guess if I lived on Custer, I don't know what the reason would be that you'd prevent me from turning left on a Saturday or a Sunday or night or middle of the day. And we didn't notice that item because it wasn't proposed at that time, so they obviously didn't have a chance to give their input there. So I think the options are, A, we could go with that permanent restriction. Based on the analysis from the traffic engineer, they do not believe that a restriction is needed. They recommend that we start without a restriction, and then if there's a issue or concern identified later, we can always go back and put a left turn restriction in. That is an option. And then the third option would be kind of a compromise between the two, where we would just make the left turn restriction before and after school during that pickup and drop-off time. So my opinion is that I don't see there's a need for it right now. I think that we could take the wait and see approach, and that's what the consultants recommended as well from their traffic study. So that kind of lays out the issue, and happy to answer any questions, or the school district and their representatives are as well, I'm sure.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Actually, my only question, because option one seems like a no-brainer for me, because we can always add it later, and we can add it relatively quick, if something comes up. Explain, if you wouldn't mind, either yourself or the consultant too. So we're reversing it on both streets, but yet the biggest traffic impact is really, seems like it's going to be Jackson and Kentucky. Currently, it's Kentucky and Central because of, there's two entrances to Merrill. There's the east side and the west side. It's not going to necessarily be the case. It's now going to be, it's shifted over a street. Do we still need to inconvenience those that live on Central by making that still a one-way? I don't know enough in terms of traffic flow, so I assume you're going to educate me.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I wasn't part of the staff discussion last week, but I guess one of my observations that the mayor and I talked about just yesterday, it may be appropriate to switch the one-ways until such time as the old Merrill is down or its fate is determined. Because then if, let's for example say Merrill was taken down and that's an athletic field and whatnot, we may not need, I think I tend to agree with you that we might want to consider changing Central to a two-way again, because let's be honest, people don't like one-way streets, especially in residential areas. We have very few of them, but we know that when these come up, that happens. So, but Jim and I didn't have a chance to talk, and I don't know if that was part of their analysis. But I think it would be premature to do it until Merrill's fate is decided.
But I guess at least to have the idea that we don't have to just because we currently do. That if it's not warranted, the preference would be to have it two-way. That would be, in my humble opinion, because you're right, residential neighborhoods just don't like one-ways if they don't have to have them. So, and you're right, it may not be this time, discussion for now or a holdup now, but please just keep it in mind as things progress in the project.
Yeah, we didn't evaluate, that wasn't even discussed or an option. I think the main concern for the school district now is getting that one-way on Kentucky so that they can proceed with their
Yeah.
layout.
Absolutely, and that's a no-brainer.
Because if we don't approve that one-way south on Kentucky, that really gives them, they got to go back to the drawing board, basically. And I don't know if Nate, if you wanted to add anything?
No, I just wanted to state that we did not study Central as a two-way. Obviously, yes, it probably could operate as such. I think additional study could be warranted to value that. But I guess in the temporary year of both facilities standing, we think that the flipping of the one-ways would be crucial, not only for the operation of the new building, but then operation of the current Merrill building as it's a full elementary school for the two sites.
Good answer? No?
Your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, Nate Considine with Bray Architects from Greendale, Wisconsin.
Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, man, I'll just jump on that. I understand the need short-term, but yeah, long-term, the fewer one-way streets we have in the city, the better, in my humble opinion. And also agree on the need to not put any left turn restrictions on there for now. That's kind of what the data we have today tells us. We don't need it. We are making a change, so if something changes, we can always go back and revisit it. So appreciate the recommendation.
Yeah, so basically what I'm asking for today is just direction on which way we should write a proposed ordinance, which would be brought back to you at the next meeting. And then just, we'll probably ask that we waive the second reading so that we don't have to make them come back a third time. So that would be our ask.
So we would need an amendment to choose one of the options.
Yep.
I would also note that apparently spell checker got us on the second one. It says onto Customer Avenue. Should be Custer. They probably changed it on us, but if whichever option you would like to choose, we would need an amendment to pick option 1 or pick option 2.
Councilmember Erickson.
I didn't have any questions. Just wanted to say I'm supportive of option 1. I'm happy to make the amendment unless anyone else has questions.
And then the option 1 under the first page, whereas, would correspond to the option 1 under the now therefore, correct? Or are they
Yes.
independent here?
You just need, whichever one you pick is under the now therefore.
All
You
right,
just need to pick one under that section.
okay.
I'll second that motion.
I don't think she made it.
I'll officially make it.
I thought that was official, my bad.
I'll make an amendment to recommend the no left turn restrictions from Central Street onto Custer Avenue.
I'll second that for real now.
All
And
right.
do we need to put in there that we'll waive the second reading and everything too right away?
You can just bring that.
Okay.
when we're ready.
All right, any other discussion on the motion to select option 1? Please call the roll.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Hanson,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Wojciechowski,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
All right. And 21-537, approve 2022-2024 agreement with Greater Oshkosh Healthy Neighborhoods Incorporated was withdrawn by the applicant. Is that coming back on a future agenda? Do we know when?
Hopefully the next meeting on
Okay.
November 9th.
And we're at council discussion, direction to city manager, future agenda items. Are there other future agenda items that anyone would like to submit now? All right, future meetings, budget workshop and hearing, Wednesday, November 3rd, discussion of enhancement requests for the 2022 budget. That is also a public hearing on the budget, folks.
What time is that at for the public?
Hearing is at 5 PM. And then the workshop, depending on your discussion tonight, how much discussion do you want following that? Typically, you have some discussion based on public input that you may or may not receive.
Okay.
And do we have any future workshops?
Well,
I think we-
as part of 30A is that discussion of enhancement requests. So this is, I think this is what Deputy Mayor Mugrower was talking about, and,
Okay,
this is the follow-up to last week's meeting. I think Mr. Van Gompel can explain it, but while he's doing the walk-up, I will point out that the fund balance issue. In my budget message, I referenced several things that I thought would be appropriate to use fund balance for. I did, however, neglect to include the phone system, even though I knew it at the time, but that one was not there. You'll see that the tan-colored line towards the bottom has amendments at no impact on the levy. One of the ones that we did talk about, that's also in the summary that Mr. Van Gompel prepared for you, is the class and comp study. And then the one that is not on this list, that's on the list that Russ provided you, is the revaluation. The reality is, based on what Mr. Alger had mentioned to you at the budget work session for assessor, we're probably not looking at that until 2023 anyway. So I think the idea is that we'll reserve the reserve But we're not going to be coming back to you with that until probably the 23 budget, because we don't need it immediately. But the class and comp study is, as I think Mr. Fitzpatrick had mentioned earlier, we're going to need to go with that. But Mr. Fitzpatrick has not spoken with any consultants yet about that study. I think he's in the process of doing it, but I don't think anybody yet so far, right? Just say yes. Oh, just briefly. Okay, so we're not ready to present the class and comp study to you yet, but Russ has identified it as something we want to get doing pretty soon. So that kind of summarizes the fund balance issue, but I'm happy to answer any questions because we obviously, we know that we're over our limit. We will probably come back to you once the audit is complete for 2021. We're projecting a surplus for this year, but rather than count those chickens before they're hatched, we're just waiting for that. Is that a fair statement, Russ? Yep. So, I gave enough time for us to do the walk-up. You want to walk council through the
One moment, Deputy.
He's good. He
All
can
right,
go first,
okay,
and then I'll go
all
after.
right. Go ahead. Yes.
Go ahead, Russ.
He's gonna
Oh,
wait.
I thought maybe you wanted to ask the
I thought
question
he was
first.
too.
No, you go ahead.
Sorry, sorry about that. I did kind of a memorandum that outlined the budget enhancement schedule that you had in your packet. And so the first block really talks about what was discussed at the last budget workshop at the end of the day, where we would add 2 officers and partial funding for social worker. If you're looking at that first box, you'll note that $39,000 is coming out of contingency. That was an intentional put into that box to get the tax rate increase, the cumulative tax rate increase at 4.5%, which is the direction City Council gave to the staff. The middle box shows what the contingency was in the original proposed budget. We had $25,000 that came up during the budget discussion for tuition reimbursement. That's actually in a separate fund, so we would transfer that out of the general fund. And my recommendation is to reduce the contingency amount to do that $25,000 transfer. And then the $39,000, which was used to bring down the levy. And then we had kind of a set aside in the contingency for partial funding for the zoo specialist and the arborist, and that was discussed as well. And then the third box is the other remaining budget enhancements for your consideration. If you continue down on that, the bottom box, as the city manager noted, is really amendments that don't impact the levy. That includes the budget enhancement for the class and comp study. I had done it in a kind of a tan color, but it doesn't come across real well on the black and white copy when it was printed on your agenda items. And then there's purple items for the other IT services that I'm suggesting that you might want to consider ARPA funding for that, and then the 4 positions in the utility budget. So that kind of gets you.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I'm looking at the same one. Are you referencing the one that you sent to us separately in the email? Because I didn't see that in the packet.
It was in the packet, attached to the memo.
Page
Oh, it is?
245 in your agenda packet.
Okay.
Yeah, that's, and it's small print, so you're going to have to zoom in a little bit. One of the things I
All
will
right,
say
got it.
with that middle box, the proposed contingency, we started at 596. After these ones that Russ has identified, that takes our contingency down to 448. And Russ, I don't know if you want to talk about that contingency and your comfort zone and, well, our
Yeah,
collective comfort zone.
It's a little bit more than what we've done in the past, and I think we talked about this during the budget workshops. Number one, we're moving to self-funding for health insurance, and we're projecting a more modest increase to kind of reduce the impact on the levy. So I think there's a greater need for some contingency there. And quite honestly, we have, in economic times with increasing pricing and inflation. So I think I'm not comfortable going much further reduction in our contingency amount. Certainly, that's your call and your decision, but that is probably about the least amount I would be comfortable with recommending to you as your finance director. I put the schedule on the overhead, or I had it put on the overhead just so you could see the different color schemes. Because the one in your packet's pretty hard to see with the different shadings.
Deputy Mayor?
Appreciate it, Madam Mayor. I have one quick question for the finance director, and then the rest was actually just for us. This is a placeholder for us to have that discussion a little bit more. You're suggesting using contingency, for example, number 8, the police add social worker and use a little bit of contingency, but there's a little bit of levy there still. It's really more style than substance, I think, but that one hinges on a potential partnership. I think that was clear coming out of last Tuesday, that from the discussion we had in that room, if there's not a partnership there, I didn't feel the room was going to be supportive of doing a full position there.
Clearly understood.
And I could also be misstating, but I also think, I think I read the room pretty well.
I also adjusted the dollar amount to reflect that. So that dollar amount that's added as an enhancement has been reduced to half funding.
All I was going to say, style more than substance, was
Yes.
maybe because that one's contingent upon a partnership and we don't know what we don't know yet.
Correct.
That maybe that one belonged down below, and maybe one of the parks ones probably moved up. But
Okay.
it was just more style than,
Well, that's the council's call.
Yeah, and given the fact that 90% of it's funded with contingency,
it doesn't really matter, but
Okay.
just, like I said, it's
we
apple.
could, we could probably move it down to that area because it's, and if they don't agree to that,
We're not doing it.
we'd come back and say,
Yeah.
we don't have that deal.
So for council, I thought we had it was brief, but I thought we had a good discussion on, at least a good start on some enhancements possible. We didn't get a chance to talk about the stuff down below in that proposed with no impact. Specifically, we didn't talk about the utilities at all as a council in terms of support, or class and comp, and then the things from admin and fire. I thought it'd be completely appropriate to talk about those and a little bit as well as all the other ones, so it was just a kickoff point, really.
Councilmember Ford?
Yeah, if it's word allowed, I mean, I'd love to bring up the fire chief and ask him a bit about the Assistant Fire Chief of Support Services position. I know that's a big one, and it's here outside of the recommendations, and I'd love to hear more about the consequences of, I know the financial consequences of funding it, but what are the operational consequences of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, and thank you, Councilmember Ford, for the question. That, it does have some dire potential operational consequences. And as I talked in the budget workshop and, showed the illustration of that frayed rope, that the administrative staff, the chief officer rank, is spread incredibly thin, that they do not have the capacity to manage, and administer all the things that need done. So we're at a position where, how do we give some relief to those chief officers? And how do we continue to maintain our high level of service and increase our level of service to meet the increasing demands of the community? So at some point, you can only spin so many plates in the air, before they start falling off and breaking. And that's one of the concerns that I have is, how will we continue to be able to provide the same service level? How will we be able to meet the ever-changing demands, the growth of the community, that, without imploding, without completely burning out our management staff, that additionally, recruitment, retention, the long-term health of the organization, that we're really having trouble getting that job, those positions to look appealing, because they see, I'm assigning onto that, it's a sucker's proposition because I'm going to get overworked. And it's not that our folks are lazy or that they're not passionate about the organization. They're committed. They've been shouldering this load for a long time. That council a few years back identified there was probably some issues in public safety around staffing, and commissioned the staffing and deployment studies for both us and OPD, You know, the findings from that were that we were undergunned, that we were understaffed, and we needed some alleviation of that. You know, and that was in 2019, that study was done, you know, primarily with 2018 data. You know, here we are looking into 2022, 4 years later, and the number of calls, the complexity of the organization, the service levels are all increasing more and more demand. You know, the scope and complexity of the projects that we're undertaking as an organization to move the department forward have all increased. So, you know, it's, this was a need that was identified years ago, and that has not gone away. It's just become more and more critical. So I hope that addresses your question.
I think so. Just quick follow-up. I mean, one of the things that, I guess I shouldn't speak for the group, but I know I'm always looking for is how are these new positions going to increase the efficiency of our organization? So for example, the police department social worker, I think the long-term goal there would be that would be an individual who's eventually replacing some of the duties of a traditional officer, calls that are more appropriate for a social worker and ultimately increasing efficiency. Would this position do a similar thing for the fire department? So
Yeah.
how?
Go ahead. Absolutely, it would increase our efficiency a great deal. You know, 'cause right now, we are operating, I guess I would say somewhat inefficiently, because we have so much dilution of roles and responsibilities. You know, we run thousands of emergency medical service calls a year. You know, 85% of what we do is emergency medical services calls. But rather than having our EMS chief focus on quality assurance, quality improvement, how do we increase our cardiac arrest survival rates, he's distracted by, well, somebody's got to do it, and you're the unfortunate one that got the other duties as assigned of, you're going to work with the communication center, you're going to take care of radios, you're going to be the liaison to the information technology department, kind of be our internal IT person, and what other, and you're going to coordinate special events. That's battalion chief, that's primary focus should be on employee development, operations, day-to-day supervision, training and efficiencies of the organization. Well, I know you should be out working with the crews, running calls, supervising those crews in the field, but you're also in charge of personal protective equipment, need to make sure that the bunker gear gets assigned, gets ordered, gets replaced, gets repaired. And if you can't get that done in your normal work shift, you're probably going to need to come in on your day off tomorrow so that you can attend to that and make sure that the gear gets issued. You know, so they said there's so much scope creep of, you know, the mantra of the organization becomes other duties as assigned. You know, so it's prohibiting us from being as efficient as we could be. You know, that's instead of doing your primary focus, you're worried about, I got to make sure a furnace gets ordered and installed because the furnace broke down last week in the firehouse and the winter's coming.
Thank you.
Just a follow-up, in that specific example, wouldn't that be more of the new position for facilities maintenance be responsible for the furnace?
The potential facilities person that was recommended by the staffing study originally and what had been proposed from admin services is to do some of the handy person work. You know, come by, the cabinet door is loose, need to fix that, you know, need to replace the doorknob, you know, do some of those things. You know, that they would not be able to do all the things like service garage doors, HVAC, things that need to be coordinated. And also, we don't have that position either. So we're having to contract out for all these different services. Somebody has to coordinate that to occur.
And did you also, I may have recalled this incorrectly, but say that if we had added the social worker, because police and fire respond together quite often, that the social worker could also help with some of the, I guess, similar type services that impact the amount of time spent by EMS?
Yeah, and I apologize for not being more intimately familiar with Chief Smith's proposed program, but many of our calls, I would be very confident in saying, you know, have a social services aspect to them as well. I mean, we are running many times the same exact call, that we're responding in tandem. So if it would, that person in need needs to benefit from some of those social services, police is there, we're there, it's going to benefit us both, absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the chief?
That's all I got for the chief, but I'm happy to, ask more questions of others if I'm allowed.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chief
this is
Stanley.
the time for that.
Yeah. Finance Director Van Gompel, if you don't mind coming up, even though you're wearing that Packer mask. I don't know if you saw the Bears scored 3 points on Sunday. That was pretty exciting for me as a Bear fan. Field goals. No, so the contingency funding, I mean, long-term, right, we can fund these positions for this budget cycle using contingency funds, but does that set us up long-term for a structural problem?
Yeah, that's one of the considerations you have to make. I mean, the positions that would be added not only impact 2022, but it has an impact down the line. So it's, we're in the business of providing services, and that's done by people. And, even if you take funding for other positions out of contingency in 2022, you're adding to your base for 2023. And those are some of the consequences you have to look at.
I would just add to that, we have not had a significant contingency account in many years. And part of the reason is inflation hasn't been an issue. Inflation is hanging over us as a potential problem. And Russ also mentioned health insurance. So we feel we need a more robust contingency account for this year. I'm not as worried about the long-term, because we're talking about something that's going to be budgeted in there within the levy, within expenditure restraint and all that. That's why we talked about fund balance earlier. That we cannot use fund balance for operating costs. Contingency, it's just that we give ourselves less room for error. And that margin of error, as it decreases, it just increases the risk that we assume.
And I would just echo on to the city manager's comments. One of the things that makes me uncomfortable is the fact that we're going to self-funded health insurance. And you heard the presentation at the first or second workshop, what I got accused of being doom and gloom when I was telling you of all the increases. And we were looking at some pretty substantial increases in health insurance. We brought that down. We brought that down to 12%. But that's still an estimate. And when we put together the budgets for the departments, I kind of used basically how we've spent in the past. And in prior years, we kind of calculated our budget use based on the assumption that positions, when they become available, get filled with full benefits, family benefits. And we kind of looked at the mix of family, the single, and assumed that was going to continue forward, which is a big assumption. And so because of some of those less conservative assumptions, I think we need to have a healthy contingency to protect ourselves so that we don't get in a negative financial position moving forward.
Does the contingency, is this the contingency that the pay for performance also comes out of?
It's not in that particular line item. We have another line item set up for that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have the page, I'm looking it up, but it's a little slow this evening, but there's a specific line item that says contingency. We have another one for that pay performance. That's actually in the personnel section of that page, but the unclassified account has that contingency. The most we've had at the last couple of years is about, 150,000-ish?
It was a little bit more than that because we have pay for performance, but we also go through a process where we calculate those individuals that might be retiring in the upcoming year. And I just would call as an example our city clerk, who's been with us for a number of years. And she mentioned to me a couple of times about her budget and, the final payout when we have to pay out the accumulated vacation and sick leave benefits. We do not put that in the individual departments. We put that in that contingency, but we look at not only the clerk's office, but all the general government offices general fund offices, and then we put that in contingency as well. So part of that salary contingency is to cover those payouts when people retire.
Is that a standard practice to put it in contingency when we know that those things will happen?
Well, we can assume at budget time that people are going to make announcements, and whether they make announcements or not, it's kind of hard to tell. Things change, and people make decisions, after that fact. So, we try to get an idea, and we've done some census on who might be considering that. But that's why we can't do it. It's so hard to say in September who's going to retire next year. Because they may be planning on it, but they may not want to announce it. They're looking at their own individual situations, and when they do decide to retire, we're covered.
We kind of use it more on statistics because somebody can make a decision to retire, then undo that decision. Or some people, like Mr. Davis, it's like, oh, time to retire. And that came out of the blue. So we have to prepare for all of those situations. And sometimes we try to talk the department head out of retiring, but it's not working. But all those things can happen, and we've seen that. So statistically, we just put a number in there that we think is going to cover all of our liability for the year.
All right, Deputy Mayor and then Councilmember Miller.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Ford brings up a very valid question, though, and I appreciate that Finance Director answered it the way he did, because council does need to be aware that, for example, there are 2 additional positions that are being suggested at 50 and 75%. Well, guess what? Next year it's going to be 100%, because the worst thing that we can possibly do is add a position and then not fund it the following year. That will immediately reduce morale and have impacts that we can't quantify. So, if that would have happened last year, for example, and it has happened in my now 4 years on council, but, if we were in that position right now, with a 12% health insurance increase, with the contracted and non-contracted labor increases, and trying to, account for 2 full positions when we had previously not, we might not have any leeway for any enhancements at the moment. So that's one thing that we do hamstring future councils sometimes when we make a decision on partial funding. Just, in full transparency, that it's important that you do know that at some point the rooster's coming home and we've got to pay for it somehow. So with that said, maybe if Parks Director Maurer wouldn't mind sliding on up here. I guess I could have asked you to do that first while I rambled on. If you wouldn't mind, I guess, so since we met last week, we've got 2 options in here at some partial funding. Maybe if you wouldn't mind talking to us about how that came about a little bit, and/or some options available to you and to us, and just give us some additional info to sell at home, I guess.
Sure. Well, thank you for at least considering it, because I think through our budget meeting with the council, I think particularly on the forestry arborist side, we did a pretty good job explaining how far we are behind on things. And with the addition of the roundabouts the last couple of years, the emerald ash borer issue that we're facing, all the landscaping beds, all those things that have been added to our department have been assumed by our current staff, which is basically 4 field staff members. As far as how we came up, or how Russ and the city manager came up with the percentages, I think they looked at how they could possibly get these into the budget with less impact, and knowing that if we were to fund the arborist position at 3/4, that would give us the first quarter of the year to get the position posted, get somebody hired to start for at least 3/4 of the year. The 50%, my assumption would be, I informed the council that we don't need that position starting out. I'm comfortable with the 50% of the year. I think that would give us adequate time, gets us into the summer when the zoo is operating. By the time we get somebody in there, they'll get their feet wet. By the time the fall comes, possibly having the additional exhibit, getting them involved with that. So I think it's doable. I think it's appreciated, and I think the staff is looking forward to hopefully getting some assistance out in the field as well.
I know, I mentioned it during that budget cycle, and I've mentioned it every year. We continuously, underfund our expectations of the Parks Department. When we add roundabouts and we add, medians, when we're doing any of those beautification efforts, which.
We didn't add the roundabouts, Matt.
Well-
The state added them and dumped them on us.
Fair point,
And we
fair
didn't
point.
add the bear exhibits. That was a gifted suggestion, too.
But when we add those beautification efforts, there's never has been in my 4 years a corresponding budget increase for the Parks Department to maintain and/or even try to improve, but even maintain some of our infrastructure. So definitely, I'll end up being supportive of doing something with the arborist. We'll see how the rest of the conversation shakes out and see what and where and how, but just giving my council members a heads up that that'll be something I'll be supporting or trying to get some support for.
Councilmember Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. Ray, why don't you stay up there? I've been on the Parks Board for, I don't know, almost 9 years or something when I was on it. This council constantly nickels and dimes the Parks Department, and it's just the nature of the beast. I think we all know that. I'm going to agree with Matt.
As much as it pains you?
As much as it pains me, I'm going to agree with Matt that, I hate funding these 50% positions or these 75% positions because it dooms our future council, and maybe the world falls apart next year and they don't have the money to fund the other half. But I want to apologize. We know you're understaffed. I know you guys are getting killed, and you had zero summer help in some departments. Is that accurate?
Correct.
So, and Bill, your group did a great job this summer. We really appreciate that. But I am going to vote, I'll make a motion as soon as I shut up to add enhancements number 7 and 12. And fully hope that we can fund the rest of that position next year.
So I have a question here for council. Would it make sense for us to do this by removal of items first and then get down to the recommendations? I don't know if folks want to do it in reverse there, the process of elimination?
Generally, I was doing the affirmative.
Yeah, I'd rather be positive about it.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
So I guess I'd like to make a motion to accept enhancements number 7 and number 12.
Would you hold the motion for just a moment so that others can weigh in on their issues or their requests?
Yes,
I'm not hearing any interest level in that.
You made the motion, you can,
All right,
point of procedure, right?
all right. We have a second discussion on the motion.
Second.
We've got one. Mr. Ford did. My only, I'm going to go with that. Oh, there you go. You press the button. You go ahead.
Councilmember Wojciechowski.
I am supportive of both those, but I gotta be honest, I don't feel completely comfortable accepting number 7 without number 8. I think if we're really looking to address some of the issues that police is dealing with, I think the social worker is crucial to addressing those issues. So I do support 7 and 13. I don't know, not completely comfortable without having 8 along with 7, but that's just my opinion.
Councilmember, or Deputy Mayor, and then Councilmember Erickson.
You go right ahead. I'm going to defer. I'll turn my button off.
Okay. I would just say I also echo Councilmember Wojciechowski. I think having the social worker position, I know, we've talked about how important it is to have that connection with the county. hopefully that can happen. But I think knowing the possibilities, the potential with the social worker, being able to alleviate some of the, the calls and things that, the nonviolent calls that police have to kind of do extra work on, I think there's a lot of potential there. So I'd like to see the social worker position included. I am also supportive, this is always a tough juggling game. I'm supportive of the assistant fire chief position, figuring out how to make that work, but I will throw that out there too, my support.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I was a little critical, I know police chief's not here, somewhat critical in my questioning with him on Tuesday or Monday, whatever day it was. The days ran together for 16 hours of budget hearings with you all. But I think it's an interesting concept and an interesting possible partnership with the county for number 8. And I think it's worth giving a shot. So I'd be supportive of doing number 8, as long as that partnership's there. If it's not, we can't do it, would be my opinion. To Councilmember Miller's motion that's on the floor, personally, I was inclined a little bit more to do the arborist than the zoo specialist, but they need help. And I know that they'll take, I think they'll take either one. If I remember right, zoo specialist was priority 1, and arborist was number 2 in a preference order, or are we
I think it
incorrect
was
on that?
That was the other way around, wasn't it?
I'm going to remove this and just smile a minute, because that's the same question that the city manager and the finance director posed to me. I would say right now, the priority is the arborist, knowing that it's an immediate need. It's been work that we are behind on for years, and knowing that the zoo specialist is going to be needed. And as I told the council, I'm looking at some potential alternative opportunities to help fund that position. I can't say I can do it fully. So I think the arborist position for us would be primary, and I would hope that if there's some flexibility to give us through the summer, to possibly come back late summer or fall, say we have this opportunity on the funding for a portion of the position and allow us to fill that position later in 2022.
Okay. As a continuation, in terms of process that we do up here tonight possibly, I know there's a motion on the floor for 2 things. I'm wondering if both gentlemen might be interested in rescinding that and starting over and only doing one at a time, in terms of allowing us to go up or down. And otherwise, I'm going to be honest, we could make the attorney's life and the clerk's life a little interesting this evening. Just from past history, it may be a little cleaner.
How about if I amend my motion to number 7 and number 13? Will that simplify things?
You should withdraw.
I'll
the original
withdraw, thank you. I'll withdraw my
and
motion.
Make a new motion.
Hold on,
Yep.
Mr. Ford has to agree, because
Yep.
he's second.
I
Yes.
We had
had
actually,
Councilmember Hanson as a.
Oh, you had it? Okay.
Redacted.
Yes.
To rescind, okay. I think it might just be a little simpler if we want to go straight up, like you were asking about, if we wanted to
Yes.
go on the negative, or the reduction side or the removal side, it may just be easier and simpler for all of us if we go one at a time, in terms of, you got a motion, make it, and if it flies, it flies.
Perfect.
I
So-
agree with the Deputy Mayor. That's what I was thinking when I was
Yeah.
referring to it as a process of elimination.
I'm supportive of it.
One item at a time. And if you want to amend that along the way, we can.
Mr. Miller, do you have a motion?
I make a motion that we accept enhancement number 7.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion on enhancement number 7. That's 2 officers. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I'm supportive of adding officers to OPD and putting more bodies in the streets with some of the things we're seeing locally in terms of activities and crime rates and things like that that aren't appealing to me. But I will say I'm cautious with the overtime, the net overtime savings. It is what it is, but I'm cautious on that. I'm hopeful that that can be achieved. I guess we'll, time will tell on that one, so, but I will be supportive of that enhancement.
I'm supportive of adding one of the officers at this time and can express support for a social worker when we get to that item. Councilmember Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. I did talk to the chief, and I know some of you have also talked to the chief. He made it very clear to me that he would prefer taking the 2 officers at this time and working on the social worker with the county in the background. So he made it very clear to me that he would take the 2 officers over splitting that with a social worker. So I'm going with what he's telling me, and I'm just listening to the department head. Thank you.
And I'm also listening to the benefit that that can be to the fire department as well. Are others interested in expressing on item number 7 that was moved? Any further discussion on item number 7? All right. I'm sorry. Councilmember Miller's motion on item number 7. Please call the roll.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Mughrower,
Aye.
Hanson,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Wojciechowski,
Aye.
Palmieri,
No.
carried 6-1.
All right. Councilmember Wojciechowski.
I would like to make a motion to accept number 8, budget enhancement.
Second. Discussion. Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, I'm just going to reiterate what I said earlier, that I hope long-term the expectation of this position is that it does ultimately increase efficiency within the police department, where we're actually, I mean, I get, right, there's a safety concern where you can't just send out a social worker, you got to send a regular officer with them in hopes of, right, not hopes, but to protect them. But I'm hoping long-term that this can be maybe a first step toward reimagining some of the way we respond to calls and ultimately increasing our efficiency and our effectiveness. And I also think it is crucial that this position is contingent on us getting that partnership with the county. That's where our human services are located, and it really only works, I think, if we do have that collaboration.
Other council members, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. City manager or even the attorney, I guess, if you wouldn't mind, because that's a sticking point. That's a hard one for me, that it has to be a partnership with the county or I'm not supportive of it. So do you need us to, I'll amend it if I have to include it. But I just want to make sure that it's crystal clear that from this council right here and now, that would have to be a requirement, that it's not giving carte blanche to do a half a year without it.
I think what this does is it opens the door for us to talk to the county about how we can share this position. That is what I read from this whole thing. Whether it's a county employee that they share with the city, or a city employee that we share with the county. I don't know that yet. I don't know exactly how that'll work, and I think time will tell with some of that. But it's crystal clear to me that we are not hiring a full-time position, fully funding. This isn't enough to do that. This is to fund half of a position, not a position for half a year, like with some of the other ones we have here. It's very clear to me, and now I'm on camera saying it, so.
Councilmember Ford.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, happy to hear that. And just to be clear to the public, this is not about us trying to save money or pass the buck. It's recognizing that to actually have that collective impact we want to have in positions like this, we have to align our resources with the resources of our partner agencies.
And I think if Chief Smith were here, he would say part of this is to help make our people more efficient, because this is about prevention. And we have to prevent these calls from becoming a law enforcement issue. And if we can prevent them on the front end, then we'll never have to worry about them, never. We will reduce the ability for us to have to deal with it on the back end.
In addition to prevention, though, it also gives some relief to those officers who are already doing that work.
They
As
do.
I understood it, that there is a significant number of calls and hours spent doing social work by officers, and that it was not, that was a priority, yes, prevention, but it was also about reshaping and shifting over to someone who has that experience that those officers are already doing.
I would say it's all of the above. It's not what you said or what I said, it's
It's
what both
both.
of us said.
Yes.
And that's why and I think Chief Smith has been working towards this ultimate goal. And I know that he had discussions with the county about a sharing of a position. So I don't think this is going to be a surprise to the county.
Councilmember Miller?
Thank you, Mayor. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but didn't we reassign a police officer just recently to handle some of this mental health stuff? So, I mean, the police department is making great strides, so we've got a full-time officer assigned to these mental health situations already?
We took an officer off the street to work on that issue, and I don't think that'll necessarily go away, but that's the reason the chief asked for 2 full-time, because one of them is really to back the one he
Replacing
just
that
pulled
one,
off the
yes.
street. And he's only done that in the past, 3-4 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
So maybe we're not having clear discussion about the difference between the behavioral health officer and the social worker. Councilmember Erickson, may I impose on you to kind of separate out for some of us what a social worker does? Is that a little bit imposition to you?
I don't know if I would be the best person to ask that. I don't know if city, go ahead.
Deputy Mayor?
I'm not an expert. I won't pretend to be one, but from the discussion that we had with the chief, please keep in mind the behavioral one is a uniformed officer. He's a gun-toting officer that is specifically, he's trained, he or she is trained in law enforcement, but has additional training on active threats, active situations where someone's in immediate danger to themselves or others. And through their actions and through, how they come across and the training that they have, they are better prepared than most of the rest of the officers to help in a situation. We've got some highly trained officers, and, the chief talked about how many have gone through all the de-escalation training and all those things, but that's the glaring difference. Social worker is just that, a civilian who has specialized training in human services, and a police officer with behavioral training is just that. I think that was.
And as I understand it, the marriage of the two is exactly that point. One person has a gun and one person doesn't, and not all situations might necessarily need that armed. I'm sorry, Councilmember Erickson.
Thank you. Just to add, I think there's also precedence for a social worker position that kind of works with police department. I think City of Eau Claire, Superior, Janesville, all have social worker positions within police departments. I think some are also shared with the county too.
All right, any further discussion on the motion, which is for adding the social worker? I'm sorry, I've lost track now.
Number 8.
Yes,
Yep, number
adding the social worker, number 8. All right, please call the roll.
Erickson?
Aye.
Ford?
Aye.
Mugrower?
Aye.
Hanson?
Aye.
Miller?
No.
Wojciechowski?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Carried 6-1.
All right, shall we then move on to the proposed contingency for Parks, number 12, zoo specialist?
I think we're just making our own motions.
Yes. I thought we were going down the
Oh.
list individually. Deputy Mayor?
No, I was going to motion to move for number 13, not number 12.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Discussion on 13, parks, arborist funding at 75%. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. My only question I have for council, and this is about your appetite for levy. I would prefer not to use contingency, but I will use it, or I will accept it, and accept its use if we need to. But doing a arborist at 52,000 would move your cumulative levy increase to about 4.6, 4.61% instead of the 4.5 that we've decided to be at right now. That would be my one question for council, if there was appetite for putting it on the levy instead of using contingency.
I would support that. You're talking about at the full rate, not 75%?
No, at 75%, but paying for it with levy, not paying
Oh,
for it with
okay.
contingency funds.
I
That's my
misunderstood.
question. Because by the time, honestly, by the time that he gets it posted and hired anyways, it's going to be March or April, let's just be honest.
Councilmember Ford?
Yeah, I'm okay with that, mainly because the use of contingency funds also makes me nervous. Makes me a huge hypocrite too when I teach budgeting, and I just gave a big lecture about how you don't do this and don't allow your colleagues to do this, because what it does is it sets up a long-term structural problem. So we might feel good about leaving tonight with a 4.5% tax levy, but we're gonna be paying for that next year, future years down the line, once we actually staff the position.
We're selling the future out.
Yeah.
So would you like to make a motion, Deputy Mayor?
So I've already got one on the floor for number 13, but I will motion to amend to apply it to the levy and not use contingency funds.
I'll second.
All right, discussion. You on, Roth?
I'll be on.
Okay,
Just
go ahead.
because I don't want to do something without, if the finance director would like to yell at us, I'll take his yelling at us. He has that right to speak to us when we start moving numbers around. So if you'd like that opportunity, I want to give you that opportunity before we vote yes or no.
We should have given you popcorn. You could just throw it at him.
Rather than a buzzer or a shot collar.
You know, it's council's directive on how you want to go with it. And to the question that Councilmember Mugrauer just presented, you know, if you want to add that to the levy, that's a decision that you need to make. And I think he's got pretty accurate numbers on what that might do. If you're willing to do that, fine. I was working under the parameter that council kind of gave us a directive to stay at that 4.5%. And I wanted to give you an option of how you could do that. But yeah, I wouldn't yell at you.
Yeah,
So your
the yelling
guidance is-
isn't coming from us, the yelling is going to come from
No,
your
yeah,
constituents.
and it absolutely will, and it's warranted, but the finance director's guidance is always appreciated, so.
No
it's,
problem.
You keep us in line and try to keep us out of trouble.
So just so I understand this, the column, I'm sorry, Director of Finance, the column with the increased percentage, so we would be at 4.6 with adding the 2 officers, right? And adding the social worker, 4.59? And then you're talking about going at 4.61. Where am I lost?
I also deducted for the reduction in overtime. That brought it back down to 4.49.
All right, I didn't have my screen maximized.
That's okay.
It's
All right.
small. Yeah.
I'm struggling with with the
With-
mask.
no, you
my
got it,
glasses.
but it's-
What you've approved
cumulative.
so far.
Yes.
You're exactly at 4.5%.
Right now, you're at 4.5.
Okay.
And give or take, it's probably another 5 cents on the levy. No, excuse me, no, penny and a half.
About a penny and 3/10,
Yeah,
1.3.
Yeah, that math.
So if it takes us to 4.61, did you say? For 75% of the arborists, what would a fully funded arborist take us to?
I do.
Third more, another 14,000, so another third of a penny. I'm ballparking
Yeah,
it,
that's
but
about right.
Yeah, I did lousy on the math the last time, but I'm catching up.
So I guess I'd like to know appetite for going on to the full, given that incremental change. Councilmember Ford?
I'm most comfortable staying with what what was asked of us. So the 75% position, since that's what the department had requested.
But, Mr. Mauer, was it your intention to request 75% of the arborist and 50% of the zoo specialists if we don't support the zoo specialists at 50%? Does that change the picture?
I'm still hopeful for the zoo specialists, so, but as far as changing the picture, I would say the 75% I would still be comfortable with, just knowing that typically over the holidays is not a good time to post a position. So we're probably going to be posting shortly after the first of the year, so the schedule would fit that 75%. So I'm still comfortable with that.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes?
Just one other follow-up point, just to your thing about full funding versus 75%. Again, the impact for 2022 would be the 75%, so the full funding really kicks in 2023, just to kind of help put that in perspective.
Yes. All right, thank you. All right, so the motion is on number 13. Do we have any other discussion? Are we ready to vote?
Just to be clear, there's an amendment on the floor for.
This is
using-
for the amendment.
This is the amendment only first, to use levy instead of contingency.
Amending to move that into the levy, yes.
So levy vote first and then full vote.
All right, please call the roll.
Erickson?
Aye.
Ford?
Aye.
Mugrower?
Aye.
Hanson?
Aye.
Miller?
No.
Wojciechowski?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Carried 6-1.
All right, and now the full motion is amended. Please call the roll.
Erickson?
Aye.
Ford?
Aye.
Mugrower?
Aye.
Hanson?
Aye.
Miller?
No.
Wojciechowski?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Carried 6-1.
All right. Do we have any other items on the middle box? Councilmember Ford.
I'd like to make a motion to approve number 9, the position for the fire department.
Second?
Discussion? Councilmember Ford.
Thought since we're raising money left and right here. No. And the budgets are hard, right? I think the chief deserves an up and down vote on this, in that this was a position that was recommended 4 years ago. I think we need to recognize that it's expensive and it does blow us through where we said we were comfortable with on our tax levy, and I'm cognizant of that. But at the very least, I want to make sure that it's out there and that we recognize that this is a need that's not going away, whether we pass it or not tonight. Needs to be on our radar.
Any further discussion on item 9? All right, please call the roll.
Erickson?
Aye.
Ford?
Aye.
Mugrower?
No.
Hanson?
No.
Miller?
No.
Wojciechowski?
No.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Lost 3-4.
Alright. And I just want to ask a clarifying question too. For number 19, I asked that this be put in there, even though it was discussed during the workshop that these dollars are under administrative services already. And that's why I wanted this just entered into the record here, because I wanted to, is Mr. Fitzpatrick here? Yes. If you wouldn't mind repeating the discussion we had at the workshop about this money being under admin services in the training fund?
Right, yes. It's my understanding in talking to the finance director and city manager that there are funds that have already been placed in our budget. We had them in there initially for our training that we did this year, and they decided that we requested an enhancement so we could retain those funds. Actually, it's a little bit of an increase. It's $30,000. and then those monies could be shared for additional training for employees this next year, as well as some needs that the DEI committee may have in terms of helping facilitate their development of a plan, a strategic plan associated with DEI.
So is it clear that the 50,000 that we're talking about then would be shared amongst DEI for a coordinator slash facilitator for them to achieve their plan, but also to help with everyday operations, DEI measures and objectives throughout?
It's for a facilitator, a consultant that would help, and it's 30,000. That's been placed in the budget. It's for training for our employees, and then also for some facilitation services for the DEI committee to help develop their plan.
Councilmember Eric Wojciechowski.
I guess just to follow up on that, if a budget enhancement were made, maybe not quite as much as the mayor and hers suggested, but could an enhancement amount be used in tandem with that amount that's already in there to, if the desire was to have a coordinator position?
I don't know exactly if you're asking me if I think that we should pursue a coordinator at this time. Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm trying to figure out, because I know there was the enhancement, or I know the mayor had submitted one requesting a certain amount of money specifically for the coordinator, like having a coordinator position. If that amount was changed, could that be used in tandem with the 30,000 that you have administrated? Like, could they be combined for a position?
I think certainly they could be combined in the budget, but I don't know if it's necessary to add those additional dollars.
That's what I was trying to kind of get at as well. Thank you.
Yes.
But it would not be dedicated. It would not be a dedicated coordinator, as this enhancement request was for a limited term employee or a consultant contract for a specified set of activities.
And I think what we spoke about just briefly at the DEI committee meeting last night, as a matter of fact, was that I shared with the DEI committee some of my experience in these sorts of forums that we're having right here tonight. And I shared with them that I thought that, if a plan was constructed, and if that plan identified the need for a DEI coordinator, that I think it would have a better chance to be successful, because there will be competing interests, just like the council's struggling with tonight. And that way, it could be illustrated to the council what those needs were, what that position is going to be responsible for, how it would help the city. And I hope that was well received by the committee members. But the idea was to try to get a plan in place, and that this would be a stepping stone potentially to a position if that was what the plan identified, and then illustrated the potential need for that. So that was the dialogue we had last night with the committee.
Councilmember Wojciechowski.
Yeah, I can echo that kind of seemed to be the consensus, or just discussion that we had around it, that the coordinator position is the coordinator, but the facilitator is the immediate need of the committee to develop that plan. And, the idea maybe down the road would be that a coordinator would execute that plan. But I think getting that plan and having that facilitator is the immediate need.
And just one more thing I would add in conjunction with that, we thought that it would be really beneficial, because we have work that we're going to be doing inside the organization. We've had our individual training, we've had a retreat, there's been some items identified that we'd like to infuse in our own strategic plan. And we thought that having a consultant help both the DEI committee and our activities inside the city, that could really help merge the efforts of both those groups, because we thought that was the intention when the committee was originally created. So we thought that this could really be a beneficial stepping stone to having that take place by having one person kind of serve as an assistant to both groups.
And whether you call it a facilitator or a coordinator, if they are helping DEI and the bridge between internal and external, that seems to be the spirit in which that ordinance was created. So I will, I guess, actually make a motion to adapt 19, but at a lesser amount, 20,000, to bring that 30 up to 50 to that end. Do we have a second?
Second?
Any further discussion?
I guess I'm unclear on what a lesser amount is.
The 20,000 to bring it up to, so Mr. Fitzpatrick said they have 30. So I'm changing my request from 50,000 in here down to 20 to add to the 30 to get to 50. Deputy Mayor.
Nope, Bill can still have the floor.
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead.
so Fitz, so that would take our money away from DEI training and so that the money that we're using for consultants for DEI and training, so that would go away then?
No, I think if I understand the mayor's idea correctly, there's already $30,000 that's been established in the budget for training and facilitation services for city activities and also the activities of DEI. And what I think the mayor is suggesting, she'd like to bump that 30 up to 50.
Correct.
So she'd like to add $20,000 to that.
Have we used up to 30,000?
This is for this next year.
Okay, how much did we use this year in this particular category?
We used $25,000, but we didn't have any facilitation services that were set aside for the DEI committee.
So this takes us back, Bill, to when we were setting aside the 25 initially for them.
Okay,
So it got eaten into, so I'm saying I'm willing to reduce the 50 down to 20 here to add to the 30 they have left.
So then there would be a total of 50 rather than 30.
but we're not adding a position, this is just, we're funding our DEI fund, right?
It's supporting our DEI efforts.
Okay, so with the consulting and the continued training and everything internally here?
Correct.
And I think
Okay.
the committee's interviewing people, different firms and everything.
Correct me if I'm wrong, we accepted our facilitator.
Yes, right. As a matter of fact, they made a decision on who they'd like to work with at the meeting last night, so.
So we
They
are,
don't know yet,
we are
so-
moving forward.
And I thought it was a good decision, so, hopefully, we're looking forward to being able to work with that person.
So the motion on the floor is?
To adopt number 19, but with a modified dollar amount down to 20 from 50.
But it's not for a coordinator position.
It's not for a.
So we're not adding any more staff to the levy or anything? Okay. all
No,
right.
it's, that should be modified to say EDI
Funds.
Services.
services.
Are you okay? I don't
Yeah,
want to put
no,
words in your
no,
mouth.
that's more
Support EDI
generic.
efforts.
DEI services.
EDI efforts.
And I think we already had a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were in discussion. Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Russ, no, I think Russ wants to add something here.
I guess I was kind of looking for a point of clarification from the mayor's request, because I wasn't quite sure, but your proposal would add that to the levy?
This is in the middle box,
Yes.
sorry.
So that would add it to the levy, I'm assuming, but I wanted to make sure
Yes.
everybody was on the same page.
Yes,
Yeah, I was making that same assumption.
yes.
So what we do
I
next,
wasn't, to me, sitting out there, it wasn't clear, that's why I had to ask, I'm sorry.
it's not in your middle box, so it's not contingencies.
I-
And we'll provide a summary next week on Wednesday that kind of gives you a running total of where you're at based on the actions you're taking tonight. and you can take other actions next week. And that's entirely within council's purview. The advantage for us with this process that you're going through right now is that this gets us closer to telling you where you're at, so that when you adopt the budget finally, you got a really good certainty of what you're getting yourself into.
So these aren't necessarily set in stone. You could
No,
decide
you
to take something
can,
out next
I
week.
hope you don't change your mind, but you have every right to change your mind. You got, after tonight, you really have 2 more shots at it. But I was gonna wait until after to do that speech.
Councilmember Ford and then Wojciechowski. Oh, I'm sorry. Deputy Mayor was first. Go ahead.
So my concern is staff didn't ask for this, and without a plan for what it's going to be used for. Now, I'm going to be told that it's used for DEI efforts, which I support and we have supported. It will appear that we're just throwing money at something instead of giving it with a desired outcome and an intended purpose of a specific outcome. Staff didn't ask for it, DEI didn't ask for it. So council's going to create something or wants to increase something without any other direction or a clear outcome, I guess is my question of the why.
Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, just a couple things I want to point out. So last week at the League of Municipalities conference, we had the pleasure of sitting in on a session with equity coordinators from other municipalities. And one of the things that stuck out to me is that though we're not doing perfect, we've got a long way to go. We actually have one of the more aggressive equity frameworks that is out there, whether we realize it or not. I can tell you that the department heads certainly realize it. I hear our names being thrown about in negative ways on occasion. No, right? We're making you do all this stuff. We've already put a bunch on your plate and coming up with these equity metrics. And the idea there is, right, a deliberate process of creating buy-in internally. And that's going to be reflected externally. I don't think that works by just having a position. Now, all that said, and that's why I don't support this specific request. But if this is not about creating a position, and this is about building up our equity infrastructure, and it's about one-time spending, I do think that this is an area where we should have that discussion when we go through our ARPA. We dedicated 75% to our infrastructure. I mean, I think equity infrastructure is totally appropriate. I don't think creating something like this on the levy is a smart way logistically for us to go.
Councilmember Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I agree with what both Matt and Mike have said. However, Fitz, what do you anticipate your spend to be? And again, I think we all know I'm one of the frugal people up here, but so do we have an anticipated spend, Fitz, or is it just you're going to use up the funds that were available to you next year?
Well, I can't say that we'll use the entire $50,000, but I would say that, one of the things that we're exploring based on our retreat and training that we originally worked on was the potential for us to have our own internal DEI committee made up of staff members that represent each department. It's a common practice in other communities. We're looking at a variety of different models. So just as this consultant would help facilitate some of the planning associated with the DEI committee, the appointed committee, I envision this individual also working with the on-site committee, the committee that's made up by employees and leaders in our organization, to try to make sure, as I spoke about earlier, that we're moving together in tandem, that we're synced up with our DEI committee, that when we develop our plans internally and also when the DEI committee develops their plan, focused primarily externally, that we're synchronized and that we can move forward and be effective not only internally but externally. So that's just a glimpse of how some of the money would be spent.
Thanks, Fitz, and I guess I appreciate the mayor's efforts on this, and I hope that our very creative finance director could find us those additional funds. But I agree, this probably isn't the right process to do this in. But again, emphasizing our most spectacular finance director could find us some funds for this, so. No pressure, Russ.
Councilmember Erickson?
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to find ways to be able to give the kind of infrastructure support for DEI to be able to carry out its goals. You know, in order for them to be successful, we have to be able to back that up with resources. So I'm supportive of both this, but also knowing that this may not go through. I think this would work also for ARPA funding. I'd be supportive of that too. So.
All right, please call the roll.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
No.
Mugrower,
No.
Hanson,
No.
Miller,
No.
Wojciechowski,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
lost 3-4.
Okay. Other items that folks want to consider here this evening on the enhancements? Deputy Mayor.
I know it goes against what I suggested just a little bit ago. Of course, I'm going to contradict myself. Is there, before I make a motion though, if I were to make a motion for numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, and 10 using ARPA funds, would anybody object to doing one lump sum, one lump vote on those 5?
I'd like,
If
To
there's any
talk
objection,
about-
I'll do them separately.
I'd just like to talk about it before we, well, I guess we have to have the motion before we can, but I guess, to me, these seem like needs that would have been the case regardless of the pandemic. And I was kind of confused as to why we placed it under potential ARPA funding, since this is such a high priority and a need.
I think it's a fair question to ask the finance director.
They are definitely needs. And again, when we met with the departments and the city manager, we were looking at potential funding for a lot of different things and a lot of different projects. And to me, I thought recommending your consideration for ARPA funds made the most sense for our organization at this point in time, knowing that we wanted to minimize the increase in the tax levy and realizing we have critical needs that need to be accomplished. And I've talked to the city manager about presenting a more composite list of potential ARPA projects. But these are the ones that were identified when we went through the budget process with our administrative services and information technology, and we call them out as budget enhancements because of the dire need to move forward at this point in time.
Well, from the silence up here, nobody's telling me not to do it. So I'll make a motion to include enhancements 2, 3, 4, 5, and 10 using ARPA funds.
I'll second that.
Discussion.
The only thing I wanted to add was this, I'm appreciative that the way that these got brought forward, that they were a part of the CIP process and that we're using cash for these and not attempting to use any sort of debt for their tech-related items, and tech-related items have a wonderfully short shelf life. So I'm very appreciative of the cash purchase or the suggestion of using cash funds.
Councilmember Ford.
I'll just say real quick, worth pointing out too, that every time we do fund something this way, we're taking burden off of all of our other sources, including the taxpayer. So I know it's, and I get what the mayor's point and then the question about, how do we connect those dots between this funding that was designed to help us in our, overcome our COVID disruptions, to the actual expenditure? And I do think that we can do that, and unfortunately, maybe not unfortunately, but we can't do that with almost everything, because we're dealing with right, these diverse resources all the time, and they're coming from different places. But every time we use something like this, which is money that is one-time, money that is not coming out of the levy, that is not coming out of debt financing, we are freeing up funds for other things. So I do think that those dots can be connected, even if it's not so clean.
And I'm supportive of the items getting paid for. However, it starts to become kind of death by 1,000 cuts into the ARPA without us seeing the total summary and recommendations, and commits that. And it just seems like a rather roundabout way of committing ARPA funds before we've looked at everything in totality. But have to trust that the finance director and our long-range finance chair have the best view of this. So I will support it, but I caution that we are already committing ARPA funds before we have seen the total recommendations. All right, anyone else? Please call the roll.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Hanson,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Wojciechowski,
Aye.
O'Meara,
Aye.
carried 7.
Deputy Mayor.
I'm on a roll, so I'll just keep rolling the dice, I guess. I'll move to approve option 1 using fund balance.
Second.
Discussion. Move around.
Mind if I just go?
Just keep rolling.
So my only concern that I just want to make sure council considers is do not vote to approve this unless you also have good intentions of supporting the plan that comes out of it. Because otherwise, it's just another expensive study sitting on a shelf. And Mr. Miller's probably smiling over there because he loves studies sitting on shelves. But if we do this, you can't not back it up because you're telling the staff
There's a chance.
there's a chance right now, and then to do nothing is detrimental. So just, that's my only thing, and I like it that we're using fund balance. I expressed that last week, and finance director, I think, wants to give us some additional info.
The only additional comments I had is, again, I'm not quite sure the timing of when the study gets completed, but for your reference, we do not have anything in the 2022 budget to deal with this specifically, but we do have, again, another rationale for some contingency money or that is salary contingency amount to take a look at, is we do have some money set aside, so if we get the results and we have to make some adjustments, we can do that. But right now, any implementation of that study and that financial impact is not in the individual departments right now.
Yep, and more, it'd be more like 23
Correct.
probably.
By the time it gets all done, yeah, you're.
Go through the process.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that.
Good point.
So I have a question then. The guide here, or the legend here, shows that the tan is from fund balance, the purple from ARPA, but the utility items 15 through 18 have no designated color, so where would that come from?
Yeah, if you were to consider those 4 positions, they would all come out of the various utility funds. I don't have the allocation broken out, but basically, all of those would be a third between water, sewer, and stormwater.
I think the environmental tech is mostly water, though, isn't it?
I would rely
The first
on
one.
Mr. Robbie on that one.
All you gotta do is give me a thumbs up, James. I think, yeah, number 1 is water. That was the one that new testing requirement that we have that is coming down very, very soon for
The lead and copper
For
rule?
lead and copper, yes, thank you. And so that's water. The other ones are a third. And we can get into that after you vote on
Yes.
the deputy mayor's
I just wanted to
motion.
make sure I understood what that was. All right, so we are on the class and comp study. Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, just want to point out quickly that funding this with the fund balance is a direct result of the Long Range Finance Committee creating a policy to have a responsible number on our fund balance, and we're over that number. So this is not us, spending down our rainy day fund haphazardly. This is funds that went through a deliberate process to get to this point.
And just to follow up on that, the purpose of the schedule that the city manager handed out earlier this evening was just to give you an illustration of where we're at in our fund balance. What's the maximum amount heading into 2022, even though we're not there yet, but just assuming that would be the maximum, and then what we were looking to use and what was still available, and there's still some funds available in that. But just wanted to call that to your attention.
Thank you.
Councilmember Miller?
But
You're good? Okay.
Ford handled it, thank you.
All right. All right, are we ready to vote on item number 1 under proposed amendments with no impact on the levy? This would come from fund balance. Please call the roll.
Erickson? Aye. Ford?
Aye.
Mugherawer?
Aye.
Hanson? Aye. Miller?
Aye.
Wojciechowski?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Carried 7.
All right, so we have 2 through 10. We have 1 through 10. Proposals on items 15, 16, 17, 18?
Madam Mayor?
Yes?
If I might, these are offered in the order in which they're done. I think asking for 4, while they are legitimate needs, I think in terms of us, I would do no more than 2. That would be my recommendation to council.
Well, I think we're going to go through these one by one.
That's okay. If you don't
Yep.
get a motion, because there's other ones
Right.
that didn't get any motions at all, but the first 2 are, number 1, or excuse me, number 15 is the one about the lead and copper.
Is that the top priority?
That is
Councilmember
far
Ford?
and away the top priority. And I think Mr. Newman's hiding behind Mr. Robbie. I think both of them can speak to number 16.
Councilmember Ford?
I'd love to get Russ back up quickly to talk about the funding source, just more specifically in English. If it's coming from utility funds, it's coming from ratepayers, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so would passage of 1 or more of these have an impact on our utility rates?
If we pass more than 2, you're definitely going to have a larger impact. And then that's why, in my recommendation to the city manager, we felt comfortable with potential consideration of the top 2.
Okay, so while this does not increase the tax levy, it does increase fees and the burden on
Gotta get paid
residents.
somehow.
What would that fee look like
important to
for item 15?
For items 15 and 16, they're really, if you look at the grand scheme of the entire water and other utility budgets, it's not that significant. Well, all parts play into it. You're talking about a $15 million budget for each of the utilities. It's not something that would be alarming to consider.
$200,000 on a $45 million budget. That's how big our utility operations are.
Even more reason to be frugal.
Absolutely responsible.
Well,
James, could you just talk to us a little bit? Especially for the people at home that are cringing right now because your water bills are going to go up exponentially no matter what we do here tonight. Basically being forced upon us by outside forces, mainly the DNR. But tell us why these positions are so necessary, and especially with number 15 and what's coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, certainly. As we talked about, last week, and I think, you had to step out a little bit early, so you missed some of that discussion, is, with the lead and copper rule, which is originating at the federal government level, being passed down to the state and then being passed down to us, we are looking at exponential increases in the amount of sampling and testing that we need to do on an annual basis. For example, some of the lead and copper testing, we're currently doing maybe 20 tests a year. Some of those are going to over 1,000 tests a year. Several of those samples can no longer be collected by property owners. Our staff must go out and collect them. And it's not just collecting a 1-liter jug, it's collecting 10 to 12-liter jugs of water to send in for analysis. So the federal lead and copper rule revisions are creating an exponential impact on our testing requirements and our sampling requirements, and us needing to go out and do that instead of relying on the property owners to assist us. Did you just want me to talk about 15, or do you want me to kind of?
Why don't you keep going? You're on a roll unless somebody else objects. But
Well, and as the city manager mentioned earlier, you know, that environmental tech position, that's primarily water and sewer with, you know, some of the additional testing that we're going to need there, but primarily water. The GIS technician, this is a position that, you know, when our GIS administrator position was created 6-7 years ago, you know, we always knew we were going to need more. And with the implementation of our asset management, you know, we're at a point where one person simply cannot do this work and keep these systems tied together. The engineering program manager, the technician program manager, that was the one, as you may recall, that we had proposed to cover the cost of with right-of-way permit fees and take over the management of the right-of-way permitting system. So our proposal would not have an impact on the rates, that we would propose that right-of-way permit fees would cover the cost of that position. And then the CIP plant technician, that would have just been split between water and sewer, the 2 treatment plants, to help us keep those CIP projects from our asset management plans moving forward.
so number 17 is basically 80% paid for. Is that accurate?
We've been doing some analysis on that, and we would bring forward a recommended fee structure that would cover 100% of that position on the right-of-way permits. Currently, we do not charge anything for our right-of-way permits. We've established some very modest base charges for the fees as we've been analyzing them, and, you know, as the amount of work that goes up significantly with installing significant infrastructure, that fee structure would increase accordingly.
And so we've got 96,200 in there. That's not really accurate. Is that a safe way to say that? I mean,
Well, that would be the cost of adding the position, but it would be covered from the permit fees from the right-of-way permits.
perfect. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Ford?
So what I'm hearing, this is for my fellow council members, before I make a motion, it sounds like the combination of number 15 and number 17 would address the most pressing needs, which is taking care of that unfunded mandate from the state, and the need that, or the expenditure that'll have the least widespread impact, which is number 17.
But the GIS tech was of great need as well.
Correct.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
So are you making a motion on 15, 16, and 17?
Nope, I'm
Mike?
trying to get us to talk about it.
I'll make the
Councilmember
motion then.
Wojciechowski.
Oh,
I appreciate Councilman Ford bringing up that point, because I think if the idea is that, you know, the balancing act, I think that is a responsible approach to that. 15 is obviously the most needed one, and I'm supportive of that one. But after hearing, you know, you give that information on number 17, I think that is an appropriate action to take, and I would be supportive of it.
I guess I'll make the motion then, if that's okay.
All right, Councilmember
I'll
Ford.
move approval or adoption of number 15 and number 17.
I guess I'd like to hear more about before you do that, Mike, are you okay if I step on your toes?
Well,
There's more
guess-
questions, I can
Wait,
withdraw the
do we
motion.
have a second on that first before we
I'll
discuss
second
it?
it.
Okay, now discussion.
What, I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more about the GIS tech. I mean, everybody I've talked to recently is saying how important this position is to us. So can we just elaborate one more time? I know you guys talked about it, but
Well, I could add that the GIS tech position has actually become critical in need. And I'm not using that word lightly. Our GIS admin is floundering right now in trying to maintain and evolve the structure around our GIS data sets. We are in the process of, through tonight's approval, getting our GIS environment upgraded to modern state. We're trying to redesign the GIS data structure to accommodate moving forward. One person cannot continue to do the editing. It's literally impossible. This position is needed to support the GIS initiatives. So it's critical.
So the motion right now is for 15 and 17. Am I hearing that somebody wants to amend that to include 16?
Yeah, I'd like to amend that to include 16, so, with no objection from you guys, so.
I would second that amendment.
All right. Discussion on the amendment? Councilmember Ford?
I guess I'd go back to the city manager whose recommendation was to adopt no more than 2 of these. Curious to, I know earlier that night I said that
Yeah.
budgeting is hard. It's hardest at the end, because the big stuff's easy. It's these smaller things.
I think James can speak to his confidence in building the fees for number 17. I think that's crucial to that one, because if we can't raise the fees, then it will be a burden on the rates. If James is confident that he can get the rate structure in that will support that position, that can change the dynamic.
Mike, so simple math, number 17 is free, so we're paying for 15 and 16. And, yeah, I'm being sarcastic.
I think that's.
Deputy Mayor?
No, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you're okay, go ahead.
No, I was going to just, to respond to the city manager, the engineering division manager and I have been working on that structure since our last Tuesday's conference or workshop with you, and he's gone through and analyzed the last 2 years' worth of permits and come up with some recommendations that, on average over those last 2 years' worth of permits would cover that cost. And as I mentioned, it's, a nominal $15 per permit, and then for longer projects that are placing a lot of utilities, a lot of structures, there would be increased charges for those.
And I wasn't here last week while he was doing the follow-up, so I appreciate that. Plus, I want to put him on record, because when we come back for these fees, they're not going to be insignificant.
So Mark, I just want to clarify, when you counseled us to perhaps only go 2, knowing that number 3 was free, so are you saying?
No, it was, my assumption was that it was going to cost us. If he thinks he can pull it off getting fees,
Yeah,
it's easier for me to swallow.
okay. And he assured me that he could do that as well, so that's.
So, yeah, and I wasn't privy to
Nope,
that because last.
We haven't had a chance to catch up on that
My
since last
apologies.
week.
No,
Yep.
it's really my apologies for not following up with James on that, so thank you. But still put him on the hook, because it's got to pay for itself, so.
Councilmember Ford?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and that's helpful, and it makes it easier to swallow. And really, I mean, the reason I'm harping on this is that these rate fees, and we've had this conversation with the Clearwell, you want me to bring that up? These are regressive fees. It's not like, right, it's not like we're just targeting one side of town or one neighborhood, rich, poor alike are paying for these things. So I know that the tax levy gets a lot of attention, but these fees are arguably as important. So that's why I'm harping on it.
I mean, we could throw another monkey wrench in there and talk about conservation fees and the volume discount fees, which are another whole ballgame, but we can have that conversation at another time. So the amendment is to add in 16 to 15, 16, 17. Shall we take a
Correct.
vote on the amendment? Please call the roll.
Erickson?
Aye.
Ford?
Aye.
Mugrower?
Aye.
Hanson?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Wojciechowski?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Carried 7.
And the full motion. Deputy Mayor.
I just wanted to say thank you to Councilmember Ford. I appreciate that he pointed that out, that it is on my 4 years on council, it has not gotten talked about enough, about the decisions that council does make, and we make them with full good intentions and fully informed, but every decision we make does impact those ratepayers. And so when we talk about, and we hear about those that have less, than others. Those that are struggling, we do make those decisions right here, sitting up here, that we are impacting them, and so that we're not making those decisions blindly, but that we do make them with good intentions, and that we're trying to improve the process and improve what we do, as well as maintain consistency and maintain, well, expectations with DNR and state and things like that. So fully supportive of doing these three, and I'm thankful that the Public Works Director found a way to finance the third one, and I'm glad to hear that. So appreciative of that and supportive of all three.
Councilmember Miller?
Thank you, Mayor. While I agree with both Matt and Mike, I just can't emphasize enough that our utilities are forced into these positions by regulatory changes. Nobody up here wants to spend our taxpayers' money like this. I mean, but, you know, in this case, if we don't do this testing, I'm sure there's going to be fines and consequences and everything else. I mean, there are no options to adding these positions. Between the feds and the DNR and the state, it's kind of like shared revenue. It's a joke. But just so the people at home know, we do not have the bodies to carry out these orders. It's just, it's ridiculous. And I think that's worth noting. So thank you again,
I
James.
think it's also worth noting that these are in place so that we can continue to deliver clean, safe drinking water, and that cannot be understated. You know, there are various parts of the world and the country who are struggling with that, and even in our state. And so the investment that we make in that is critical. And the regulations may be a bit piecemeal. It's my understanding that's been the topic of water around the state with DNR and the EPA. But I'm pretty thrilled to be able to turn my tap on and trust that I can drink that water and not get immediately ill. So I think folks are understanding that we are trying to continue that quality. And as you said earlier, the confidence that what we're bringing in and what we're putting out through that water distribution is quite a difference. It's cleaner, we're told, going out than coming in. But that's not without a lot of labor and regulation and bodies, as you said. So I appreciate folks working together on this. All right. We are at the end. Please call the roll.
Erickson?
Aye.
Ford?
Aye.
Mugrower?
Aye.
Hanson?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Wojciechowski?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Carried 7.
So Madam Mayor, what we plan to do is we will redo this sheet for you for next week's work session on Wednesday, and we'll show you the impacts of all the actions taken by council. And the other ones will still be there, the ones that it'll be listed what your action was, thumbs up, thumbs down, or no action, so that you still have that. And then if there's any additional discussion, you can have it next Wednesday. But on behalf of staff, I thank you for giving a lot of thoughtful discussion. You just spent an hour and 40 minutes on this, and it's really appreciated.
Future workshops. Do we have any upcoming workshops?
Not at this time.
Special assessment presentation follow-up.
This is probably more about getting feedback from council, any reflections or anything. With that said, I will report to you a couple things. Number one, I was invited and have accepted an invitation to attend the Chamber's Public Policy Committee meeting. Mr. Mazonik and Mr. Van Gompel and I think are going to be going to that meeting to present pretty much what Mr. Mazonik presented you at the last meeting, but we also have to, Mr. Mazonik's was just about the solution, but I think we have an obligation to talk about the problem, which is special assessments, and that council is looking for an alternative to that. So I will be happy to report back to you. That'll be the 8th, and the council meeting's the following evening, so on the next agenda, I'll give you an update on that. With that said, I'm still anxious to hear, I think some of you heard some things happened in the past week with some lawsuits in that. The Village of Pewaukee, which made a presentation at the league conference last week that I was the MC for, they've been served with a lawsuit, and you know that the town of Buchanan's been served with a lawsuit. They're both different because Buchanan's under Chapter 60 town rules, and the Village of Pewaukee is under Chapter 62 as villages. We're a city, so everything's just a little bit different. But the principle is that the lack of, the belief that we don't have home rule authority, which I took one law school class in grad school, and home rule was like one of the most important features of that. So we humbly disagree with that, but it is what it is. Thoughts,
Anyone have
comments?
feedback? It's crickets up here on that, the presentation from last week. Councilmember Ford?
It was good. No, we got that letter from WMC, and I was like, I used to have a cubicle that I rented there when I was a lobbyist, and now they're sending me threatening letters. I don't know, the mighty have fallen here. No, I was staring out at my sidewalk and thinking there's got to be a better way to pay for this than the way you're charging me for this. So I think we need to keep moving forward. I think it's totally clear that the public finds the current system unacceptable. So I think we're doing the right thing, keeping pushing forward. Thank you for taking the heat at the Chamber Conference, and looking forward to hear how that goes.
I will tell you that the session that I emceed at the league conference was a standing room only crowd. I think people are looking for different options. Everybody has different motivations because, for example, Pewaukee was looking to offset its operating funds. We're looking at replacing special assessments. Some were interested in what and why we were doing it, and others were not. Appleton is looking to change from the wheel tax. They also received a similar letter from WMC. So even before they have hired the consultant, the shot's been put over the bow.
Councilmember Ford and then Deputy Mayor.
Nope, I'm good.
Are you good? Okay, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It probably comes as no surprise, I'm supportive of moving forward. I agree with Councilmember Ford. Our current system, there has to be a better way. And we've gone through a couple iterations over the last couple of years. Myself and the mayor have been around for those.
One of the few things we agree on.
Right? Well, it is. It actually, yeah. There has to be a better way. And I think right now, with the information provided and the information that I know over my couple of years on council, this seems like a logical and responsible way to proceed with eliminating special assessments. There's a couple little things in terms of staff work that I wouldn't mind seeing as part of this process, and most of it will fall on Mr. Robbie and Mr. Van Gompel, but I think it would be appropriate for this council to know, because some questions have been brought up about, well, people are currently paying a special assessment, or people got done paying a special assessment, and I still am of the belief that there is never going to be a good time or a good cutoff point for looking back and trying to give some relief. But I think it's appropriate for this council to hear about relief options, even if I disagree with them. I think it's important that some options be provided to council so that they can make an informed, that we can all make an informed decision on that caveat, that part of this, because that is a big part of the public perception. And the public, the problem in the public is those currently paying and those previously paying. So I think it would be appropriate for staff to provide us with some information to consider. Additionally, how we're actually getting to our number, what's driving that? Well, cost of pavement, right? Cost to actually physically do the job is what's going to drive this magic number that that per unit number. Are there ways, are there other options that our staff would consider presenting to us as options of trying to reduce the cost of road construction? Most likely, it is what it is. But getting informed on some other communities and what some other communities are doing, it might be appropriate to hear if there are some ways within our policies that, that staff would be considering of, give consideration to making amendments to how we currently do some of our road projects. Because the only way we're going to do more projects is if we find more funding. And while I'm not supporting of that at the moment, the other way is reducing our costs. So are there ways to do that? I think are my two questions as part of this whole process over the next few months and what we hear from staff. Just my own thoughts.
And I think in response to that, actually, several years ago, it was proposed to, look at where appropriate, the narrowing of the streets. And that saves, I guess, exponentially in the number of streets. And I don't recall what the difference was, but I specifically recall South Oregon Street, where it was proposed by staff that we did the narrowing and widen the sidewalks, but the pushback was that particular section of businesses wanted to keep it wider, even if they had to pay more, which it's not just they in that area. So I'm interested in seeing some of the other potential technology that's coming out that can save in the cost as well.
Yep, basically, I'm not an expert, I won't pretend to be one, and I just want to hear from the experts and from the people who do this every day, and if there's options available.
Councilmember Erickson.
Thanks. I'll echo what, or agree with what has been said already. I'm interested in seeing it move forward. Obviously, still questions and some hesitations that I've been kind of passing along to get some answers on, but I think it's progress on something. Special assessments obviously have, we've been hearing so much of how that has not been working well for residents and property owners, so I'd like to see it move forward.
It also supports our affordable, livable city, initiatives in making housing more affordable when it's in a digestible chunk. But I suppose that's a conversation for another day, so I guess it's kind of obvious I'm supportive of it moving forward. Do you have anything else you need from us on that?
No, I don't think so. I think we'll be back soon.
All right, we are at report of council liaison for boards and commissions. I'll just share, we had the quarterly regional comprehensive planning, East Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission meeting this Wednesday, 2045, and that is for the 10 counties, much like our comprehensive planning updates that we do here at the city. However, they make the distinction between a minor and a major update, and this one for the region is a major update. So that's what's going on with our Regional Plan Commission, and there are many pieces and parts to that. There's still time to give public input. You can find the 2030, the prior comp plan milestones on East Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission's website. And I'll pass to other council members that want to report on boards. All right, none? City manager announcements and statements.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Couple items in your agenda packet: a cooperative purchase for the budgeted emergency generator for the Grand Opera House, and a cooperative purchase for a gazebo for Riverside Park for the Parks Department. That was from the River East Neighborhood Association, so excited to see that. Speaking of neighborhood associations, we have one more neighborhood association that we're adding. So, Ms. Nyforth, what are we up to now?
20.
20.
Oh, sorry.
She was in the hot seat all night. And you took away her one moment in the sun,
Tell
yeah.
us about tell us about Bent Woods.
Yeah.
Well, you see up on the map, it is just north of Congress Field and near Lumber River. And it's kind of unique. Bent Street runs through it, but then they were creative, and I think there's like oak and some other woods that run through, so they got pretty creative with their name. But we're really excited to see another neighborhood association in the community.
Welcome, Bent Woods.
Speaking of that, I'm going to take liberties with this, just in case you hear it somewhere else. Mr. Wiley in Ms. Nyforth's department is going to be leaving us. He has been appointed a principal planner for the city of Marshfield. A great promotional opportunity for him. We are going to miss Stephen. He's been a pleasure to work with, but you can hang on to great people as long as you can, but you can't hang on to all of them for 40 years. So Stephen will be joining the folks in Marshfield, which explains why the administrator in Marshfield was avoiding me at the LEAP conference last week. It was just kind of weird.
He
like
was
owed me money.
poaching and you didn't know it.
Yeah, well, there's always payback, and I'll find somebody on his staff that will poach, so. But I just wanted to say that, because Stephen's done so much with the neighborhood associations, and I thought, I wanted you to hear that, because you'll be leaving us in a few weeks. Outstanding issues are in the packet. Happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding that. I did provide the third quarter update for my goals to council at the last meeting. And speaking of third quarter, our strategic plan, given the volume, it is online. You are welcome to look at it, and if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to contact either Mr. Fitzpatrick, Ms. Moran, or myself. I skipped over 38 by accident. I'll go to the state of emergency because Deputy Mayor Mugrauer had asked. Given the fact that we are still in a what's considered a very high zone for transmission, we need to continue that state of emergency. The fact that we're still wearing masks, and based on the input I did receive, we're going to be extending the mask mandate for through November here at City Hall and in city buildings. I think we're all tiring of them, but we feel it's necessary. We're hoping that with the imminent nature of youth vaccination, that'll help things. But I will continue to report on that, and happy to answer any questions. I saw some poised folks ready there, so I'm happy to answer any questions about that.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess my question's going to come around to what parts of our state of emergency are vital to keeping it open right now. For example, a couple of the things that it allows the city manager to do is certain purchasing authority, as well as certain just emergency powers. But I guess, is there anything specific in there, or is it more general? And I'm looking for why we need to continue it.
Sure.
It's no reflection of where we're at within the pandemic myself personally, and it's just, I don't know, have you had to use any of the powers of the emergency in the last several months, or even over the last 12 months? We haven't been reported to that. That hasn't been reported to us.
I would say the mask mandate has been a continuing one. And Chief Stanley is here, so no, I was giving you the cue to come on up, Mike, so come on up. I think Mike can address that more. There was an issue that came up just last week, and I said under emergency purchasing, we did one just last week for something with facilities, because everything is so messed up with supply chain. I considered it part of that whole emergency. Chief?
I think we're questioning your new Mercedes, Mark. I think that's where this is going.
But those little chips are putting the delay on that, because everything in the supply chain, as we know very well, is just totally screwed up. Chief?
Yeah, to echo the city manager's comments, that's the implications of the emergency, no news to everybody, wide ranging. So certainly purchasing is going to be a mounting issue. It's going to continue probably to get worse. I can speak specifically to my experience with the fire department of we can't get repairs done, we can't get equipment, we can't get hose, we can't get, there's ambulances approved in the 2022 CIP, and we're being told we're not even going to have a chance of seeing those before 2023. So we had to do some fast working with Russ in the finance department and the purchasing department to create some promissory notes and letters so that we could even get our names on the chassis to get those in 2023, or else it was going to be at the end of 2023. So, I know we are getting dramatically impacted by some of these purchasing issues in the fire department. I can't imagine that the police department, the parks departments, the library at all are not having these same issues. So I think it is paramount that we still have that flexibility to make some of those emergency purchases so that we can stay operational. That unfortunately we don't know what we don't know yet too of, 1 week it's chicken wings, the next week it's microchips, the next week it's toilet paper. What is going to be the impact? It's very unpredictable. As the city manager noted, we're still in a state of emergency. That we still have a very high positivity rate. We still have a very high infection rate. We still have the necessity for wearing masks. We do not have juvenile immunizations yet. We are just now approaching the ability to have boosters. And have not seen a widespread of that yet. So the numbers, peaked a little bit again, went up the hill on the roller coaster, and I know we've used this analogy before. We're going to continue to ride that roller coaster. They've dipped down a little bit again, but what's the upswing look like? That the fatigue that was mentioned earlier is real. Everybody's sick of masks, everybody's sick of the lifestyle limitations, and that has caused kind of a systemic effect of disregard for precautions. We're not socially distancing anymore. We're not wearing masks as much as we should be as a society, all those things. So are we out of the woods yet? No. So do we still have a middling vaccination rate in this county, in this community? Yes. Is the infection rate still very high? Yes. Is the hospitalization rate very high still? Yes. That we are still at surge capacity in the hospitals and have very few ICU beds and hospital beds and services available. How will that impact us? Now, granted, you say that's the hospital's emergency to manage, but it's going to become the community's problem when we don't have enough nurses and doctors and beds to take care of the people that are sick and infected or have non-COVID related illness. So we still need to be nimble and still remain in that state of emergency, in my opinion, as the emergency manager, so that we can continue to mitigate this. Would we have ever thought we would have a nationwide emergency that would last 2 years? No. Never in the history of the United States, no. That most of our emergencies, the tornado blows through town, we fix it, we help people, we get them back on their feet, we get back to normal, and we move on. Yeah, we're used to a shorter duration. This is, for not to abuse the unprecedented terms concept, but we've never seen anything like this in emergency management. In the history of the United States, even with the flu pandemic in the early 1900s. So my recommendation is keep the emergency declaration active. There's no, I know Councilmember Mugar was asking what's the benefit? Well, there's certainly no con against it either. There's no detractor.
I think, and we may disagree a little bit on that part. I think I think my point really probably comes down to oversight and our legislative, our legislative role up here in terms of the checks and the balances of decisions. And so, while many of the things that you both just listed are important, I didn't hear anything personally, and not just because I'm choosing to be a stick in the mud here, but like that actually needed emergency management approval or emergency order approval to do those things. And I don't want to pretend to play anything that any role I shouldn't play here. But I think if it's going to continue, if you want it in place longer, I think it's time to start telling us what decisions are being made under that authority going forward. And it doesn't have to be immediate, but that this body does deserve to know how you're using that unprecedented length of a emergency, how you're using that authority and power that you have. Because we have a right to know what's going on and to check that. So that would be my own personal opinion. I don't speak
I
for anybody
agree.
else up here.
I agree.
Appreciate that. And I think that's a reasonable request. Thank you.
Is it possible to have that under, I don't know, outstanding issues, that the state of emergency itself is an item, and where you have other notes or that to include? Or would that be more informational?
Let me
in
talk to
another-
staff about it and just
Okay.
kind of figure out, but I think what I'm hearing is, when we exercise this, what did we do? And I was at the conference last week when I got the call, and I said, that seems an appropriate emergency measure, go ahead and do it. It was a purchase, I can't remember, John will remind me as I'm leaving tonight, but I'll let you know. And I think you do owe that, because it's like, well, what are you doing with this power? We're not doing a lot, but it's still appropriate to tell you.
But one of the things is, based on the, health experts, continuing the mask requirement in the buildings, right? That's under those emergency powers.
We're following, we're still following the CDC guidelines as our North Star. So that's that.
Appreciate that
Thank you.
update.
Mr. Fitzpatrick provided you with a memo. Originally, the council did ask that we put on the agenda setting the levy and rate for the bid. We did some research, and we determined, based on this research, that the council's approval of the bid plan includes the levy, so we can't separate those. I thought we could, but our research indicated that we couldn't. So that's why it's not on the agenda. Mr. Collins, the other half of that direction was, can Mr. Collins look at some options for the rate structure for parking? He is doing that, and that will be on the next agenda. We really don't have much time. We gotta get this going. So we will be back very shortly with our list of recommendations, and then we'll bring the bid plan and budget and levy at the same time. So that'll be part of the November 9th meeting. And then lastly, just the commercials for the farmer's market trick or treat on Saturday, 10 a.m. to noon, and trick or treating Sunday, 4 to 7. That's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Well, we will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.